Hey, FanboyNation.
This is your pal Daffy Duck, and you're watching.
We're watching
Fanboy.
Fanboy,
fanboy, etc.
FanboyNation.
Dot, I assume Tom.
As this man is probably on his second cup of coffee, and I haven't even finished my first one, I'm really excited to talk to Tim Sheridan, who is responsible for Superman, Man of Tomorrow, my favorite film that I voted for Best Feature at the Critics' Choice Super Awards. Tim, how are you today?
I'm doing great, RC. It's so good to see you.
Oh, man. You know, I wish we could be in person doing this right now, but, you know, the world's kind of falling apart. I think you're probably in the Valley and I'm over in Orange County. So, you know, this is the best that we're going to get for right now.
You know what? I'm glad that we have the technology. We can rebuild it.
Oh, man. Way to play that one.
Personal point, though, I saw you on the KTLA pre-show before the Super Awards. You look great. You were the smartest guy in the room, picking Man of Tomorrow. We didn't win, but, you know, I don't think you were wrong.
Well,
thank you.
I had a quote that they cut out, and I'm going to tell it to you in this broadcast. Because it wasn't intentionally dumping on Zack and Deborah Snyder, you know, but it was very complimentary to you. And the quote was, Superman, Man of Tomorrow is everything that we wanted from Man of Steel that we didn't get.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. You know, listen, I get you say you're not meaning to dunk on anybody. Like, I mean, you know, I always feel like it's such a rich mosaic. It's such a huge multiverse. And I guess it's coming out of adapting stuff in animation. You know, one of my first big DC gigs was adapting Reign of the Supermen, which is behind me there, as an animated movie. And I just kept thinking about people saying, well, this isn't exactly the book. You know, it doesn't follow the exact, you know, they're two different media. You know, it's like you can't exactly just directly translate a movie out of a book sometimes. So, you know, you try to sort of salvage the themes and make it the movie version of the thing you remember reading. Well, you know, I feel like I've always been armed with this line, and I don't think I've ever had a chance to employ it, which is to say it's a huge multiverse and there's room for all different versions of these characters and these stories. You know, Zach's got a really good thing going, and you know, animation's got a great thing going. The comics for me are still like, you know, the real versions of these characters. But we all get a chance to sort of put our stamp on a different corner of the multiverse. And I think it all can live side by side. Why not? You know, why not have more?
Oh, no, for sure. And I didn't intend it as a dig, you know, for Zack and Deborah Snyder. I was just saying the way that Man of Tomorrow came out was the way I wanted Man of Steel to be. You know,
I think like you, a lot of people want and are hungry, especially nowadays, I mean, that movie, we got lucky that movie came out in 2020 because, you know, when have we ever wanted and needed, you know, a hopeful, optimistic superhero story, you know, with somebody like Superman who we can, you know, look up to. I feel like it was the right year for it. You know, look, and I'm not fooling myself. I think, you know, the reason we got that nomination, thank you for voting for Man of Tomorrow, but, you know, it's a slim year because a lot of movies didn't release. You know, you put a couple of Marvel movies out there, it might have been a tougher field for us to get in as an animated movie and not be relegated to the animation category. But I think it's, you know, because of that dearth of optimistic, hopeful, superhero uplifting stories, you know, I think Superman, Man of Tomorrow was kind of the right movie at the right time. You know, it was, I hate to say it's luck because it was a terrible year. It's a terrible thing. But in terms of the release of the movie, yeah, I mean, it was the right time for it, I think.
One thing I really enjoyed with Man of Tomorrow is, so my parents are immigrants, right, from the Middle East. My dad was a slightly darker complected than my mom. So my mom's blonde hair with green eyes, and my dad was olive skin with brown eyes. And I always noticed the dichotomy in the way my dad was treated versus the way my mom was treated, based on their immigrant status. And I love how that played out between John Jones and Superman in this story, because one's green and one passes, and going back and forth. But what I also really enjoyed, and I have to thank you for this, is that you didn't take a giant Harley Quinn-sized mallet and bash people over the head and go, race relations. That's what we're implying here the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it was not the goal to get that specific. Because for me, I talked about this in interviews about the movie, for me, my story isn't that of an immigrant. So it's hard to write from that place. You can do the research and you can be a person who understands, you put yourself, this is what writers do. We put ourselves in other people's positions and we imagine how things play out. But when you have a real angle on the outsider story, you draw upon that. I mean, this was not a coming out story, but that was my experience. I was a closeted gay kid in Florida in the 90s when that wasn't a really great thing to be in that place. And but the idea of feeling like an outsider in your own hometown and feeling like you have more to offer and you want to help, and knowing that if people understood who you really are, that they could reject that help. And those things, I think, are themes that we all understand, whether it's an immigrant story or a coming out story, or any version of feeling like you're on the outside looking in. That was the needle we were trying to thread. So I think, we didn't go heavy-handed on, here it is, we're talking about race relations, because that wasn't even the place we were really coming from. We were coming from, let's talk about it in a general sense that everyone can key into. And that's what these stories are. That's what myths and legends and these, superhero stories, if you can't see yourself in those heroes, they don't quite work. You have to find a way for everybody to see a part of themselves in Superman, which is tough. I mean, he's like a god, but I mean, that was certainly my version of what that looks like, and I was so lucky that Butch Lukic and Chris Palmer, Jim Krieg, the execs at Warner Brothers, Peter Girardi, Brian Jones, Sam Register. I mean, everybody was on board. They all wanted to tell that kind of story now. So very, very fortunate.
Everyone brings up Sam Register, and I've never met Sam in person, but I started following him on Instagram, and he's got like the zaniest posts that I don't know if he's trolling or if he's like that off kilter or he's just having fun and that's his sense of humor.
I mean, I don't know Sam really well, so it's I know him professionally a little bit, and but my read on him is that he is a guy who is just having a ball. He's having the time of his life, and he's successful. His success and all of our success kind of grows out of that. It's a joyful place, at Warner Animation when you're there.
Yeah.
If you're lucky enough.
If you have any stroke, at least 1.5%. Just let him know when they finally want to cast the voice of Simon Baz, the Lebanese Green Lantern. The Lebanese guy's available. Okay. I have to pitch that every once in a while to anybody at Warner that'll listen to me, and they're like, "Yeah, whatever."
Listen, if you can get it to Sam, then I mean, he's the man in charge. So.
Well, you go to the big boss, So
yeah.
You just need somebody to make the introduction.
I have to say though, like sometimes you go to a big boss and other companies, and I'm not necessarily entertainment companies, but sometimes people come in, they're people who ran a company that made widgets, and they're just making other widgets, and it doesn't necessarily mean anything to them. I mean, I think that when I'm at Warner's, it comes from the top down that, the executives have a love of the genres in which we work. And it shows, and it trickles down to everybody else. I mean, between Sam Register and Peter Girardi, Peter Girardi is a guy who you walk into his office and it's just lined with comics and trades, and he's got comics out on the table, and he's you walk in, you say hi, and he's like, "Did you read Death Metal?" And it's to be able to work in that kind of environment is very freeing, and those guys have great ideas, and it's not always like that everywhere. So it's what led to the good times that we had making Man of Tomorrow, and I'm sure all the rest of the movies that are coming out.
Well, you have a big poster right over your right shoulder that left every kid a wreck in the theater in 1987, and I'm right there with you, man. Transformers the movie. We didn't know what to expect when we came out of that theater, man. Like,
I remember the ads. Didn't they have a commercial that they ran, or maybe it was a trailer? I think it was a commercial on TV where they said at the end of the commercial, they were like, "Does Prime die? Transformers, the movie." We're all like, "Wait, what? This escalated quickly."
Right out of nowhere. They're like, we need the Gen 2 toy lines. So.
And even as a kid, you're like, well, certainly he doesn't. And then they did a great job of, I'll never, right now I'm a kid again, sitting in that theater. I feel it. I can see everything. And I remember watching the beginning of the movie, like they started with just carnage, and it started with carnage of robot people that were not Transformers but were familiar looking, and you thought, oh, that's something. And like the next thing is they're killing Autobots that you've grown up with, Ironhide and Prowl, and it's just like, wait, what's happening? And then that builds up to then, spoiler alert, Optimus Prime dying. And
listen, if they haven't watched the movie in 30 years, it's not our fault for the spoiler.
So true. No, but I mean, it's still, Optimus Prime still dies in the first act of the movie, and it's just like, where are we going now? What is happening? For me, I mean, we can joke about it, but I really take that movie very, very seriously. That came at a time when it was so formative. I think it's the whole reason I work in this genre. It's the whole reason I became a writer. That movie was the first time I ever experienced the idea that sometimes the bad guys win. Just because it's good versus evil, good doesn't always triumph. And while it does in the end of the movie, there's a cost. There's a real price that's paid. And that was heavy stuff to see as a kid. But I think nowadays there's a lot of there are a lot of people who think that we need to talk down to kids, make it easier for them to understand. And my experience growing up was just not that. Everything that was exciting, that interested me, and that made me who I am, that I think made me a better person, was stuff that I had to reach for, stuff that were concepts that were a little bit above my comprehension that I had to come to terms with. That was one of them. I mean, it's a movie about cartoon robots that transform into cars and planes, right? But I'm sitting there thinking, the moral implications of like, what does it mean to fight this war and for the good guys to die and the bad guys to possibly win? And then for them to have an even bigger enemy that they're both fighting. And, those were questions that fueled me and still fuel me. I think they show up in everything I've worked on, including now for the first time, just a few weeks ago, I got to work on a Transformers show. I got to work on Transformers War for Cybertron on Netflix, and I came out on season 2, and it is very much rooted in Gen 1 mythology and the movie universe and all stuff that I know and love. And so you get, you're going to get a heavy dose of that, the reverence that I feel for that. And for all of the themes that movie represented and that brand represented to me as a kid, which I think over time, just by nature of the fact that there's a lot of time and there's a lot of different versions of those characters and that story, it's not that it's diluted, it's just that we've seen so many angles on it now that it's hard to remember what made it so great in the first place. And so we tried to recapture some of that. I worked with some of the biggest fans of that period of Transformers on that show, and it was that was a joy.
Well, before we get to the part where you got the call to be on Transformers, I have to mention the fact that the visual that left everybody a wreck, especially myself, in the Transformers movie is not only Optimus Prime dying, but he fades to gray on top of it and just loses every ounce of color and life force there is. And then on top of that, you think back and you realize that Optimus Prime was murdered in the middle of a cheery 80s, rock jam.
Listen, that Stan Bush soundtrack is the best workout soundtrack that ever existed. That 1980s rocky, against the odds, fight for what's right kind of stuff it pumps you up. And yeah, it's what's one of the genius things of the movie. It's pumping you up ultimately for terrible turmoil and sadness. That movie works on so many levels for me. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it just pushes all the right buttons for me because it kind of programmed them. So that's why all those buttons work on me. So yeah, the fading to gray, we'd never seen that. We hadn't seen Transformers really die, and we didn't see that up until that point in the movie. But it was so provocative. It made you, if you didn't already feel like this was done and he was gone, it was just like, we're not messing around. Like, you don't you dare think that we're going to bring him back in Act 3. He's gone, like the only other thing they could have done is just have him crumble to dust, like just and away in the wind,
Well, that wouldn't have worked for the season 4 episode where he came back very briefly to try to get the Matrix back from Optimus Prime and then just kind of went nuts and they had to kill him again.
And then they brought him back, and it's like opinions may vary on the direction of the series after that. The movie is perfect. The series did some great stuff that even the movie didn't do. Like when we came back for, I guess, season 3, the dilemma of being Rodimus Prime is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. Rodimus is sort of, not having the power of the Matrix because it had been used up, not knowing what to do, his sort of, classic, as I think, misinterpretation of Hamlet, that he, what do I do? I need advice. How do I move forward? But that was how we dealt with Rodimus Prime, which was really, I think, as a leader, which was really a bold swing for a cartoon show in the 80s. But then we got a little too crazy with the plot with Optimus, and but hey, I'm just happy they made more.
And
you ever
we
watch
got our
the
parents to buy the
Japanese
toys.
Yeah, you ever watch the Japanese Headmasters show that they did?
No, I don't think so.
It's so great. It's a continuation of G1, and it's like the show didn't stop, and it gets a little crazy in the way that I think Japanese audiences were used to a different kind of show, and so they were able to bring in some wilder elements. And So it's fun to watch. It's really, if you're sort of a Transformers completist, I highly recommend it.
All right, I will definitely have to check that out. But now let's go into your work on Transformers. You come in on season 2, you get the call, and they're like, "Hey, Tim, you know this movie that affected your entire life, being, and existence, and wanting to be a writer? Come on board."
Yeah, it's actually it's one of the better career stories for me. I was finished with, excuse me, pardon me. I'm getting all choked up over here thinking about it. No, I finished my work on Man of Tomorrow at Warner Brothers, and I was done, and on a Friday, and I was like, well, I don't, I'm a freelance writer. I mean, where am I gonna? What's gonna happen next? And I got a call they wanted to bring me in to work on War for Cybertron starting Monday. So I had the weekend off. So yeah, I was, I had met with FJ DeSanto, and I knew that I knew a little bit about what was going on, what he was doing. I had seen the Machinima shorts and series, and I kind of knew what the scope of the thing was. Was all in, and did not think they would really call me. Just, they're a small, ragtag, seat of your pants production. Like, they were like there was a few guys in the room, and it was. I said, "There's no way I'm going to be able to get in here," and happily, I got that call, and it was everything that I had hoped I would get to do. I think I once I started really working steadily in animation, I thought, someday I'll get to work on Transformers, someday. But it's not going to be my Transformers. It's going to be some new iteration that comes out of a movie, live action movie, that, it'll be, so I'll have to really try to find my love for that version of the thing that I love so much. I didn't have to do that. I walked into a show that was coming from a place of celebrating the exact thing that I loved and grew up with. I mean, at that moment, what's the feeling? The feeling is, well, I'm the luckiest man in show business. And then FJ, had lots of ideas, and Hasbro had a lot of ideas about how the story was going to work and sort of what the basic broad strokes of it were. And Gavin Hignite, writer, and I sat down and just really started carving out how it was going to work. And they let us play. And that was, just amazing. I told this to Gavin the other day, actually, when the series premiered, when season 2 premiered on Netflix a few weeks ago. Gavin and I were texting about it. And I said, I'm so glad not only did I get to do this, but that I got to make a friend in Gavin. We didn't know each other before. So I'm so glad we got to make a friend playing Transformers, which is how I made all my friends as a kid. Gavin and I played Transformers, and that's how we became friends. So, and here I am this many years later, and I still get to do that. Luckiest man in show business.
I would concur with that, man. And now on top of that, you have a new Masters of the Universe series coming out. Is this going to Netflix, or is this going to HBO Max, since I think Warner Brothers owns Masters of the Universe?
No, actually, it's Mattel owns Masters of the Universe. It's their brand, and it's a Netflix show.
Okay, that's right. Masters of the Universe has the deal with DC Comics, so that's why I'm putting the mix in the two.
That's right. Yeah, I think there was a licensing deal they had. I'm not sure how that shaped up, but the series. That was another amazing call. That was another one where it was like I finished work on Transformers and then got a call to come and work on Masters of the Universe for Netflix, and that was amazing because I didn't know Kevin Smith, and I got there through Netflix is how I got into the room. But one of my best friends is a writer genius named Eric Carrasco. And he was in the room. He'd worked with Kevin on Supergirl, And so when I got there, he was there, and I was like, yay! And so we got to have just a ton of fun breaking story at Kevin's house, with the other writers. That was another ragtag small group. Let me say this. First of all, I can't talk about this experience and working on that show without first saying how, I feel like he'd hate me saying this, but how unbelievably, deceptively impressive Kevin Smith is. He is at once the nicest human being you will ever meet. The person that you see in the media is the guy who he is. He is just a warm, generous, kind person. And on top of that, he's one of the biggest fanboys you'll ever meet. Everybody knows that, but he really is the genuine article. But then to watch him work, he's one of the hardest working people I've ever, I felt like, man, I got to step it up. This guy can go off for 24 hours and come back with 15 of the best pages you've ever read. And so he really, it was like he inadvertently threw down a challenge for all of us to kind of step up and make this thing the best that we could. And watching him work, he was a little nervous. He had never really run a writer's room. And he was a little nervous going in and feeling like, how is this going to work? Well, the guy is a movie director. He knew exactly what to do. He would, like a conductor of an orchestra, he would bring out all the best ideas. He would throw his own amazing ideas into the mix. He would say, this, not that, that, not this. Let's combine it. Let's do this. It was all going on. And I was just, I gush about him because I want people to understand that he is more impressive as and a harder worker than I think anybody gives him credit for or understands. And you don't know until you're in the room. So anyway, that's my gushing about him. I will also gush about Rob David, who's our producer at Mattel, and Ted Biaselli, our producer at Netflix. And those guys are the biggest Masters of the Universe fans on the planet, hands down. I'm sorry, Masters of the Universe fans, but you know them. If you're a Masters of the Universe fan, you know Rob and you know Ted, and you know that they are really high up there. And so it was like we were taken care of the whole time, because we never had to worry about, well, does this make sense? Can we say this about this character? Can this character do this? It was always, they were always there, never to insert themselves into the storytelling process, simply to sort of say, yes, that would work, or to maybe offer an idea and say, or this could work, or this, you have this character too that could do this. And what a privilege that was, and to know that they were excited about it and that they were on board and taking care of us the whole time, made the whole experience even better. One of the best experiences I've had in a long time was working on that show. The writers are incredible. Mark Bernardin, Dia Mishra, Eric, Kevin, and then the producers. It was a joy, and that show is a joy to work on. Hopefully the people will watch it. Hopefully we'll get to make more. So we'll see. But that's going to hit Netflix soon.
I dig it, man. Well, just so we can put it in perspective for people, the voice cast alone: Dietrich Bader, Kevin Conroy, Susie Eisenberg, Sarah Michelle Gellar, Mark Hamill, Lena Headey, Phil Lamar, Justin Long, Jason Mewes. Surprise, surprise, since Kevin's a part of the project. I'm kidding. Jason's a great guy. And so is Kevin. Kevin Michael Richardson, Henry Rollins. I mean, come on, dude. Just the cast alone. What's it like as a writer? You've dreamed about this since we were kids. I think you and I are roughly the same age, except you look a lot better than I do, and you got way better hair.
I'll tape. I've taped everything.
Yeah, and more sleep. You sit there and you dreamed about this, and Alan Oppenheimer's in this, who is the original Man-at-Arms, and so many other characters, and Cringer and everything else.
Yeah, original Skeletor.
And he comes back, and the guy who you listened to as a kid in He-Man is now reciting the words you wrote for him in He-Man? Like, what does that do for you?
I mean, I remember the day I heard that we were going to get Alan to come in. Alan Oppenheimer is a legend. He's a blessing. He's a kind person who, is a genius, who basically orated the story of my childhood. Between him and Frank Welker and Peter Cullen, those guys are the best. So that was incredible. I was very fortunate. First thing I did in animation was a show called Justice League Action, which was such a fun show, and so it's gone way before its time. And we were very fortunate on that show to have an incredible murderer's row kind of a cast. And some of the guys, like, we had Kevin Conroy was our Batman. We had Mark come back as Joker, and Diedrich Bader was Booster Gold, and he was gold. As he should always play that character. And so those three guys in particular coming back on Motu, getting Diedrich and Kevin and Mark, the old band back together. I mean, that, I will say that it's ridiculous. I mean, I remember on Justice League Action going in when they told me, "Oh yeah, Mark Hamill's recording today." I didn't know Mark Hamill. I mean, I didn't know Mark Hamill, but they said, "Do you want to come in?" I'm like, yes. Are you crazy? And it was right after Force Awakens had, like, a week or something. It was like crazy. It was right after it had come out. And I remember he was like, afterwards we're all chatting, and he's the nicest man. And he's so generous with his time and, chatting with everybody and being so sweet. And he's a genius. But he was like, okay, who hasn't seen Star Wars? And a couple of people literally raised their hands, like, I haven't seen it. He said, get out, because I'm about to talk about everything. And they left. I was like, what are you doing? But they did. They left, and then we talked about Star Wars, like what his experience, like what happened, and what people are talking about online, what's right, and what's, what all the theories, and he's such a fan. He's so excited to talk about it. It was, I love people like that. I love working with people like that. That's what makes this job not a job. It becomes play. It's so much fun. I don't want to put a cap on this without talking about Lena Headey, who, as we all know, I mean, a lot of people know her from Game of Thrones as Cersei, but I think my first real memory of her was on the Sarah Connor Chronicles. And she's just one of the greatest. She's incredible. And when we sat down, when I remember, I think I was in the middle of writing an episode that had some heavy Evelyn stuff in it, when I got the word that we got her to play Evelyn on Masters of the Universe. And I stopped everything I was doing, and I went back and rewrote all of her dialogue, because it all clicked in. Sometimes everything just clicks when you just know the voice, and I said, oh, she is going to be able to do this. and so, we all, I think, went in and got to kind of give her some stuff to chew on a little bit, heighten it even more, make it even more Shakespearean, her dialogue. Boy, I don't think people will be let down by her turn as Evelyn. So, it's that show is a great fun to work on.
Absolutely, man. I can tell that just by the look in your eye and your voice. But I do have a Mark Hamill story regarding Force Awakens. We interviewed him shortly after the movie came out, and Mark is nowhere near as tall as I am, so he's about shoulder height on me. And my introduction on the red carpet was Mark Hamill, the greatest orator of The Force Awakens. And he was about to say something, and he just pauses and he looks up at me and is like, "That's funny, but that's fucked." Yeah. He didn't say it, but that was the look in his eyes.
I guess here's my question. If Luke Skywalker is closing himself off from the Force and living as a hermit and is done with all of this stuff, why is he wearing the robes when she meets him at the end of Force Awakens?
They're flowy and breathable. Why else?
He doesn't wear them in Last Jedi, like until he, I mean, I don't understand. I just wanted one line, I think, about why he put on those robes. What was that about? I bet there's a good reason. Right. I think maybe it is they're breezy. I think you're right. That's, they look heavy. I don't think you're right about that. They look really, really heavy.
All right.
There's got to be a reason.
I don't know what
he likes to make a first impression.
There you go. Now we have a whole fanfic coming about Mark Hamill's robes in Force Awakens.
I don't know. I don't know. It's one of those ones that keeps me up at night. I'm not kidding.
Right. Listen, I don't blame him for, the writers, the directors, the producers, everybody was like, Mark, you're just going to stand there, take the hood off, boom, circular shot, cut to black. And I'm like, all right, cool, man. So that's why I had to joke with him that he was the best orator in the movie, because he got paid to take the hood off.
He didn't need to say anything, though.
No,
he didn't need to say anything.
Yeah, no.
He didn't need to say a word.
That's my jealousy
anything
coming
he would
out.
Have said. What's that?
I said, that's my jealousy coming out. That he got to go to Ireland for one scene to sit there and take the hood off and make everybody lose their minds.
I think anything he would have said in that moment would have been disappointing. I think it was such an interesting, provocative, way to end that movie, ending it in a way that we hadn't really seen a Star Wars movie end. It was interesting. I don't think anybody can pull stuff off as well as Hamill can. So he's tops in my book.
Well, you had mentioned that you started off with Justice League Action, which was a very underrated show that came and went far too quickly. One of my favorite episodes is Mr. Mind taking a taxi. I thought that was hilarious, and just like only a supervillain like Mr. Mind could get stuck in a space cab, having to deal with what he had to deal with.
Jim Krieg's sense of humor aligns so much with mine, and his sense of humor is all over that show. But what's the genius of that show, I think, is that while that sense of humor is there, that sly wink is always around, especially in those Booster Gold episodes. It still manages to take the characters seriously and the world seriously. It doesn't trash any of it. It doesn't make fun of anyone. It lets you have fun along with them. That's a tough needle to thread. And we were, I was very fortunate. I came in, that show was a machine that was really running by the time I came in. I came in at the very end of the season, and wrote some of the final episodes. But Butch Lukic, that was his show, and he if you meet that guy, you might think, well, how does the sense of humor of this show come out of that guy? And it's because he appreciates and gets the jokes that Jim is pitching, and that guys like me are in there pitching, and he he's a fan. He likes it, so therefore that it gets into the show. That was what led to then me getting to work on Man of Tomorrow. Butch came in and started working on DC movies, and we had a good rapport, in those last few months on Justice League Action, and so that was what I think opened the door and gave me a shot to write that movie. Happily, I had worked with James Tucker and Jim Krieg and Alan Burnett on Reign of the Supermen, so I'd been through that process once before. But it was all new. that particular version of it was new to Butch. Butch had done movies, but this was a new thing. Butch was getting to make his movie, and I was very, very fortunate to get to help realize that, to make that happen. And we all came in wanting to make the same movie, which was, as I told you earlier, which was, made the whole thing so much more fun.
Okay, since you brought up Jim, and I like Jim. I don't think Jim is a fan of mine, though.
What?
Yes, because I asked him one question.
You can't run afoul of Jim Krieg. He's the nicest man in show business after Kevin Smith.
No. I can tell you how I did. I asked him one question at Comic-Con, the last one we were allowed to go to before the world fell apart. And he walked off in our interview when I asked, will we ever get justice for Scrappy-Doo? And I had no idea that Jim detested Scrappy.
That's not true.
Really? So
That's
he was
not
just having
true.
fun with me. Okay.
Jim does not. Jim, that is an absolute Jim joke. That's how good he is. Yeah. That is how. I'm not kidding. See him in these.
I was flabbergasted. I was like, is he really that mad?
No, you see him in these DVD. I'm sorry, I'm blowing it for him now. He probably was going to go to his grave thinking this was the best joke he ever played because you believed it his whole life. No, you see him in these DVD and Blu-ray extras where he'll put on costumes and play characters, and he's one of the things about Jim. He's a pretty good actor, right? He can sell it, and he totally, you bought it, hook, line, and sinker.
I totally bought it because the way he stormed off. He didn't walk off. He stormed. I'll send you the video.
That's how you know it's a Jim joke. He's the nicest guy who would never storm off of an interview. He would never. But so that's how you know it's a joke. He actually, we talked about, by the way, you have every right to ask me this question as well, because I
worked on a few Scooby-Doo projects.
I worked on Curse of the 13th Ghost. I wrote that movie, and a lot of people had a lot of concerns and questions about Scrappy, who was obviously a main character in 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo. I'm going to tell you that Jim Krieg he does not hate Scrappy-Doo. Jim likes Scrappy. We all like Scrappy. We all grew up with Scrappy. I think I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus, but there are elements at Warner's that don't feel like Scrappy fits with the brand anymore. And at that time, at least, they didn't. And they felt like Scrappy wasn't somebody who should be in the movie. I mean, we tried to make it work. We tried to get him in there. If I had maybe pitched a better story for Scrappy, I think maybe, or a better appearance for Scrappy, I think you might have gotten him in there. I got to tell you this: they also didn't want us to have Flim Flam in the movie, and I just
really
I couldn't abide it. And I went in with a pitch, and I said, "Hey, here's how I would do Flim Flam," and basically, I think what I got, well, I think where it came down was, fine, leave us alone about Scrappy, and you can have Flim Flam. So that was that. I hope someday. I agree. I hope someday there's justice for Scrappy. I listen. I'm the one who wrote.
He didn't get justice.
I'm the one who wrote the line, "What's a Scrappy?" I am completely to blame for What's a Scrappy. Completely. I thought it would be funny. I was wrong. I apologize. I love Scrappy.
So now we need a crossover with Scooby Dum and Scrappy and Flim Flam at some point, and then they just get their own Warner Brothers, 2-part feature.
By the way, I don't think I've ever told anybody this, but I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I'm going to tell you, this is your exclusive.
All right.
I had a pitch for Scrappy for Curse of the 13th Ghost, and I never pitched it because it only came to me late in the process after we knew Scrappy was not going to be in the movie. And what I came up with was this. that at a certain point, after it is revealed that this character, this Benny character, is actually Flim Flam, who had a growth spurt, at a big climactic moment when Asmodeus, the ghost, is chasing them through the temple. At one point, when they're cornered and they don't know what they're going to do, we hear growling, and everybody turns and sees, blocking on the other side, flanking Asmodeus, a Flim Flam standing there with a giant, hulking Great Dane who says, "Let me at him."
Just so a giant roided out Scrappy.
So he also had the growth spurt that Flim Flam had, was kind of what I was going to do. But it came to me too late in the process, and so it didn't get into the movie. And I feel like some people would have been outraged by that. Some people would have loved it, you know. What are you going to do?
Just a little
but
trumpet
I'll
on
never
his
be able
collar?
to write. Say again?
Just a little trumpet on his collar?
Yeah, exactly. I get, you know, I'll never be able to really do that. So therefore, I'll just tell you that was what occurred to me. And, you know, what are you going to do? In my head canon, that happened. That happens in the movie in my head canon.
You know what? That's the bonus feature.
That's right.
Yeah. When you tell your dad at some point that, hey, Dad, remember the cartoons that I really liked as a kid? I'm going to write those for a living. Like, and your dad's in Florida, so I don't know like his sensibilities. I don't know his personality, whatnot. But how do you break that news to your parents that you're going into the arts and you're going to write cartoons?
You know, my dad was a cop his whole life. And when I got the job on Justice League Action, he was so excited. And I sent him a Justice League t-shirt. And he sent me a picture back of him very proudly wearing this Justice League t-shirt. And there was something about the concept of the Justice League that really appealed to my dad as a cop. And you know, I was starting, I had just begun work on Reign of the Supermen when we lost my dad. And
my condolences.
He would, thank you. You know, it was, you know, he knew I was going to do it. He knew I was writing that story, and he was really excited. My dad wasn't a fanboy, you know. He grew up with Superman, the way all kids his age grew up with Superman. But he didn't know the particulars of the thing he just knew that I was getting to do this thing, and he was really excited about it. And so there's a lot of stuff. All of a sudden, that movie had some themes and some ideas and some thoughts about fatherhood and kids and you know, sons and fathers with Superboy and with, you know, with Lex and with Superman being sort of his two dads genetically, right? Clone wise. You know, I think those things sort of grew out of this natural sort of thing I was going through at that moment. I was thinking about, you know, how that happened, how we said goodbye or didn't really. So, but you know, the good news is that, you know, he knew I was doing it. He was excited about it. If he could see the stuff I'm doing now, he'd be very happy that I was getting to work on the stuff that I love and have cared about my whole life. And he would definitely be kicking himself for giving away all my Transformers to my cousin when I was a kid. When we moved.
Right.
No, I always blame my dad for that. The truth is, he asked me, he's like, do you want these? We're moving. Do you want to give them to your cousin? I say, yeah, give them to my cousin. They're like, a week later, I was like, what did I do? What have I done?
All right, I'll let you bury yourself with that one.
I want to bury myself like an Egyptian pharaoh with all my Transformers. What are you talking about? They all buried themselves with their Transformers. My mom, on the other hand, who is still around, I don't think she's ever seen anything I've ever written. And the reason is, I think I sent her a copy of my first movie that I wrote was Scooby-Doo and the Gourmet Ghost. And I sent it to her and I said, hey, I wrote this movie. And I said it in Rhode Island where we grew up. when I was a kid, where you're from, and there's references to stuff that we grew up with and what have you. I don't know, a month later or so, I said, hey, did you watch the movie? Because she hadn't said anything about it. And she said, oh, no. I said, oh, why not? She goes, yeah, I'm not really a fan of cartoons.
It's still wrapped in cellophane sitting on the coffee table.
Yes. And I said, but you're a fan of me, right? She said, well, yeah, you know. I tell you this because my mother is a sweet human being who wants only the best, but thank God for people who keep you completely grounded. When you think you did something cool because you wrote a Scooby-Doo movie, you got your mother who's like, maybe call me when you're on Jeopardy, you know?
Don't worry. Okay, since you saw me on the Critics' Choice pre-show, you know, the countdown of the Critics' Choice Awards.
You know who didn't? My mom.
Oh, your mom saw it?
No, she didn't.
Oh. No. I'm saying you.
Told me the next day, she said, how'd you make out? I said, you didn't watch the show?
Okay. So my mom was watching the show with me. And her entire reaction to the whole thing, she looks at me at one point and she goes, how much chapstick are you wearing? Like, apparently she noticed I was wearing chapstick in the thing.
Did you tell her it was lip gloss?
No, it was chapstick. My lips were dry. So I put on chapstick before we went on camera. And she's just like, you're wearing too much. Why are you wearing so much chapstick? And I was like, thanks, Mom. I love you too. Never mind the fact that I'm on the second biggest market in all of the United States. It's the chapstick that you noticed.
Totally. That is the best. That is such a mom move. My mother, my whole life, I don't think I've ever walked into a room after not seeing my mom for a while without the first thing out of her mouth being, I hate your hair. Like, well, hello to you too. You know, yours isn't that great either. I love her dearly. She, like I said, what would we do if we didn't have people to, you know, remind us who we are and keep us grounded?
Is your mom in LA now too, or is she in? She's still in Rhode Island?
No, she actually is. She lives with my brother, my older brother, in Texas.
Okay. So when you go,
so she had no chance of seeing you on the KTLA show. Unfortunately, I'm sorry.
It's all right. You know, she probably would have made the chapstick comment as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah. She's very concerned about people's chapstick levels, just like your mom.
So, okay, when you go to visit your brother in Texas, you know, what about your nieces and nephews with them? Like, is there an aspect of, dude, my uncle does this cool stuff out in LA?
Yeah, my sister lives in Illinois, and she's got two younger kids. They're getting older now, but you know, they're more in the world of the demographic of stuff that I tend to work in. Although I've been doing a lot of adult targeted animation, you know, over the years, but occasionally you'd see me do like DC Superhero Girls or something like that, you know, which I just love dipping in and writing episodes of those shows. They're so much fun. But comic books and things like that, you know, my younger nephew in Illinois is in that age group. My brother's kids are a little bit older, but before, you know, so you know they're too cool now. You know, they're not going to be impressed by anything I'm doing. But when my nephew was, my brother's son was younger, I remember visiting one Christmas, and he was telling me how he liked comic books, and and so I said, okay, well, let's go. I'm going to take you to the bookstore, and we're going to look at the comics. We're going to look at the trades, and we're going to pick out a book. And he was very excited. I don't remember how old he was at that time, you know, but he was so excited. We went, and he picked out part 1 of Hush, the trade paperback. It was a part 1 of Hush. I was like, okay, this is pretty heavy, but all right, let's do it. This is good stuff. And I insisted that he read it and not quit. I was like, you read that whole thing, we'll go and get part 2. You know, like just keep reading. And he kept saying, I'm done. I finished. And I kept quizzing him. All right, well, what happened? What, you know, and he kept answering the question. I was like, all right, fine. We went, we got the other book, and he read that too. And then they announced they were going to do the Hush animated movie. And I was like, ooh, could you imagine how cool it would be if I got to adapt the Hush movie? Like, he might think that was cool because he read it. But no, my good friend Ernie Hallbacker ended up doing that movie. But yeah, that was the age when he thought I was cool, I think, because I liked comics and stuff. But now he's an adult. His world is so much cooler than mine will ever be.
Hey, he never wrote Justice League, Scooby-Doo, Reign of the Supermen, and Superman Man of Tomorrow.
What I did do with him is, I sent him all of my comics, everything I had collected. Well, I was moving at one point, and I said, I'm gonna clear out all my books. I got rid of I cleared my shelves out, and I sent him all my comics, all my trades, and I think he still has them, actually. Which back in the day when we thought they were going to be worth money, in the 90s, when they were like, oh yeah, you got to get these variant covers because we're only making 17 million of them. So I got a lot of those.
Yeah,
he's got a lot of those.
I remember those days, man. All right, so what's next at this point? Transformers, DC superheroes, Masters of the Universe. The only thing left from our childhood at this point is G.I. Joe or Thundercats.
Let me tell you, you're naming my, top three. I mean, when you talk about Transformers, G.I. Joe, and Thundercats, those were my jam as a kid. Masters of the Universe came in after that. So if I got to, get my little paws into G.I. Joe or Thundercats, that would be real full circle for me. I really can't believe how I get to play in the sandboxes I've gotten to play in. The biggest thing now for me is getting to work in comics, which I've just now entered into. I've spent the last, year working with DC Comics, and I'm also doing something for Dark Horse now as well. I came in not knowing anything about writing comics, and you probably noticed that when you read some of my early stuff coming out. But
yeah, downplay it, Tim. It's all right. So just we can praise you in about 15 days.
Listen, I think honesty is the best policy. I came in and I said, let me learn how to do this. And it was real trial by fire, learning on the job. And I have great respect now for comic book writers and people who've dedicated themselves their whole career to that. It is not like you can just easily transfer back and forth between, writing TV, writing movies, writing books, writing comics. I mean, these are completely different media, and the whole machine works differently, and the storytelling process is completely different. And I just kind of had my editors helping and me trying to figure out how to do it as a comic book fan, looking to the books that I love and the creators and writers that I admire. And so that was kind of how I got, how I've been getting my education. I don't know that it'll ever end, but I will say I do think that they're getting better as I go. And to me, that's everything. But that's a tough business. I like to say I'm taking a little leave from the humiliating world of professional TV writing for the humiliating world of professional comic book writing.
And the difference is you're going to get more detractors and retractors from the comic book world.
I mean, there's
and don't get me wrong, that's my demo and that's my world, and I know how we can sit there and argue about Watchmen behind your shoulder, for the next 90 minutes if we wanted to.
I love fans. I have gone to, until this year, I've been to San Diego Comic-Con every year since I moved to California a million years ago, because that place is, to me, this is going to sound stupid, but I think you agree, it's sacred. That ground is hallowed ground. There are people who come there who that's the only trip for me. It's the only vacation. I mean, I'm usually working, but it's the only time I get out into the world. I don't take a vacation to go sit on a beach somewhere. I go to San Diego Comic-Con, and there's people who are there. They save up all year to go and participate, to fly in, to get those expensive hotel rooms, to buy the merchandise that they can only get there, and to share the experience with the people who make them feel like they're at home. And that's how I feel when I'm there. So, I mean, that's, to me, that's the world of fans, of fandom. And it's why we all feel like we have some kind of stake in these properties. We all feel like we are part owners in the corporation that is Superman or that is Transformers, because we kind of are. I mean, it wouldn't exist without us. We know that. And those of us who get lucky enough to get to work on these things understand that. And we try to do our best, you know, while still staying true and telling the stories that we want to tell. We know that hopefully there are other fans out there that feel the way we do, that love it the way we do, and will come along for the ride. And you can't please everybody. You know, the great stuff about these things living as long as they have, these properties living as long as they have, is that at some point, if you really want it, you'll get your shot. You'll get a chance to write your Superman, to write your Teen Titans in some way.
Or voice Green Lantern.
Or voice Green Lantern. In some
just
way.
one. I just want to be Simon Bez. I don't, you know, anybody else can be Hal Jordan. Just Simon. I'm Lebanese. The character's Lebanese. Jeff Johns is Lebanese, who created him. Let's keep it in the family, you know.
I'm trying to be Moga. That's what I want to do.
You just want to be a giant planet.
It's Unicron did it to me. Ruined me for all characters.
I do have to ask you this, though, since you mentioned San Diego Comic-Con. You mentioned the camaraderie there. Let's throw the camaraderie question out. As a fan, which panel at Hall H would you camp out for?
Oh, man. You want me to answer honestly?
Yeah.
This is terrible. This doesn't answer your question. None. I am just like every other fan at San Diego Comic-Con who is fed up with this Hall H line nonsense. It is unattainable. I'm tired. I can't wait in that line. There's other things to do.
It's hot.
Nothing is worth waiting in that line, especially if you're just going to put it online. If all that news is going to hit the minute after it shows up on that stage. I can't do it. I can't do it. There's too many other distractions at San Diego Comic-Con. Hall H, you've got to get your shit together.
Right. Live broadcast it in a different panel room or something as well, so we could watch it. Broadcast it down the street on 5th Street or whatever, and we'll just watch it down there as well.
Having said that, I will still wait in line for Ballroom 20. I will. Okay. I will. It feels attainable, and I think it is more attainable.
Well, also, all your features have been premiered at Ballroom 20. So that's kind of,
Yes, it sounds self-serving. It sounds not all of Man of Tomorrow, we didn't get it. We were supposed to have our premiere there. We didn't get it. It sounds self-serving, but in all honesty, before I ever set foot on, at the Warner Animation grounds, those were, I stood in line for every one of those movies, or I didn't really have to stand in line back then. You were able to get in and to Ballroom 20 and watch the movies when they premiered. And I did every one. I remember sitting there watching Flashpoint Paradox. My mind was blown. I was like, this is the best thing I've seen in a long time and may ever see. And I got, it's Jim Krieg and Alan Burnett and those guys, and I got to end up working with those guys, which was incredible. Real twist of fate for me. But that movie was, that changed my whole life. And so those were the things I waited. Those are the things I would wait in line for. I wouldn't wait in line. Now I get shuttled to where I need to go. There's no, I'm just kidding. I really don't. You'll see me. I'll be like standing in line forever with my husband. I got
it's the movie you wrote.
It's the movie I wrote. We got those little folding chairs. I remember, a decade ago, somebody gave out the little folding chairs that you could sit on little camping chairs, like as a giveaway, and everybody went nuts for them. And then we all realized we could just buy them. So now we carry them with us everywhere we go. We sit in them in a line, and I don't know why everybody doesn't have them. It's so funny. You whip them out, and then everybody in line looks at you like, "Why didn't I think of that?" And I think, yes, this isn't your first rodeo. You should have thought of this.
One of these days, I'm gonna buy the cooler scooter, and just load it up with water and soda, and then just ride it around San Diego.
The cooler scooter. Oh man, that's a good giveaway. Could you imagine?
Oh, for sure.
You'd be the coolest person there.
Oh yeah, literally. Because I'd be selling bottles of water in line, just rolling on up. All right, so you're married now. I assume
to a fanboy.
Okay, I was gonna assume you're married to a fanboy or someone that's like your mom that sits there and goes, I really don't like cartoons.
Let me tell you, my husband Brian is a CPA, but he is one of the biggest Marvel fans around. And hold
on, real quick. Because I get caught in this conversation all the time when people say they're the biggest Marvel fans, and then they won't shut up about the movies. And I'm like, well, what about House of M and Secret Wars and all that? So he's like Marvel fan or a MCU fan? Yeah,
he doesn't mess around.
Okay.
Just gotta make sure. First of all, like everyone, let's just baseline this. Like everyone, he's an MCU fan. I mean, the MCU is amazing. So let's just say that. But before the MCU, he's sitting there in his Marvel Unlimited, reading everything. He devours. He goes back in time. He will get onto a particular run or a character or a writer or an artist, and he just devours the whole thing. And he's the real deal as a Marvel fan. And I say this because we're a divided house. I mean, I love Marvel, but my life, I grew up, DC was my jam, and I get to work on DC stuff nowadays. And so we he likes DC too. I mean, a lot, but it's nice when certain obscure things come up that are Marvel related. I'll say, wait, what is that? And he's just like an encyclopedia. He'll say, well, that was when this happened because of this, and House of M did, I'm like, okay. It's very convenient. It's going to be great if I ever work for Marvel one day. He's going to be my secret weapon.
I believe it, man. Because WandaVision comes out for Marvel soon, on the DC Plus app. And I made the mention, I was like, oh, this is like a comedic version of House of M. And everybody looked at me that's just an MCU fan, like, my head was purple. And I'm just like,
they looked at you like you had too much chapstick on.
Basically, yeah. Yeah, the way my mother looks at me when I put on too much chapstick. No, but I sat there and I was like, this is influenced by House of M. And they're just like, no one knew what the hell I was talking about. And then I sat there and I was like, but this is a comedic version. And then you have to explain the backstory of House of M. And it sounds so tragic. And then they hear what's going on with WandaVision is this like sitcom that goes through the decades. And I was like, do you understand that she went nuts, with everything and changed the whole universe, that she's nuts here and is now living in a TV sitcom? That's the influence. And I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever, pal.
I can't wait for the show. It looks really cool. I mean,
it's great.
I'm like everybody. I'm just like, give me more. Just like, feed me.
Yeah, no, it's great. I got to see it. I did the press day, and it was a lot of fun.
Oh, that's great. That's great. No, they're doing all kinds of fun stuff. I think, there's it's an interesting time to be a fan and an interesting time to be a creator working in TV and comics and in Hollywood in general. We keep thinking, when are we at the saturation point? When are people going to get tired of superheroes and this huge multiverse and mythology and I think we have to remember that we haven't tired of it. This is something we grew up with and we're carrying with us and we'll have with us the rest of our lives, and maybe it's just broadened its reach, and this is how it's going to go. So it makes it really good when you're working in the business and you have stories to tell, and there's a lot of outlets now. So this is what I mean when I say, maybe you don't like what I'm doing. It's a lot of people don't, but hey, if you want to get your shot, you can get your shot too. I'm just a fan. I'm just a guy who wanted to tell these stories and play Transformers, you know, for the rest of his life. And, you know, that's, you know, it just takes a little bit of work. But, you know, nowadays you don't, you know, it's not like you have to be in Hollywood. You can get involved. You can do this stuff. And you can also create your own. That's the other thing. There's so many opportunities to create content now. It's incredible. I wish I was like some of these folks on YouTube and other channels that are so creative, you know, and they create these amazing things that meme instantly and are viral and people go nuts for them. I go nuts for them. And I think, gosh, I wish I had that thing in me. The creation of memes is kind of like our new cartoon, like comic strips, you know. It's to have a brain like Gary Larson doing The Far Side, or, you know, to be able to come up with a TikTok, you know, that to me, those things are they have a similar genesis creatively. And I've never been that guy. I'm a guy who agonizes over word placement and which word goes where and you know, I'm never terrified of a blank page. It's my favorite thing in the world is a blank screen, white screen, and then getting to go. Some writers are terrified of that and they don't know how to start. I've never been that. I love that part. But then I'm terrified of getting the words in the wrong order. You know, I just want to make sure everything is right.
I got you with that, man. All right, so I would be remiss not to ask. You know, you kind of alluded to it, but it was leading into the direction I wanted to go. Is it more difficult to write something that's been established? Superman 80 years, Transformers 40 years, you know, G.I. Joe 40 years, He-Man 40 years, et cetera, versus a creator-owned project like something that you'd be working for at Dark Horse? Like, which one is actually more difficult? Staying within the parameters of the mythos or creating your own?
I can only speak from, you know, my experience is almost exclusively working with other people's intellectual property. And I've been lucky enough to work with IP that I understand, that I know, that, you know, that I've grown up with, to get to, you know, I've done some work on IP that I wasn't as sort of steeped in, and it's a little terrifying. And I think that's a similar feeling to what it is when I try to work on something that's my own. It's for me, much harder to build the world than it is to tell stories in a world that exists, that the framework already exists. That's a personal thing, though. I mean, it's, you know, everybody's different. Some people, their imaginations work differently. I'm also like story is obviously everything, but sitting down to break story is the chore part of writing for me. Coming up with the story, which is the first place you really need to start. It's the hardest part for me. If there are elements of story that are just, they sort of come with the territory when you're working in an established IP. You know, when we started talking about Men of Tomorrow, you know, we said, well, where in the mythology, what can we do that's sort of new, or it feels new? And we said, you know, we don't get a lot of like Superman year 2, basically. Like Superman, you know, year 2 isn't exactly right. It's just the idea of his arrival in Metropolis. What's it like when he first starts out in Metropolis? That's not territory that is as explored as his time in Smallville or his time later on with the Justice League or what have you. And so there's a framework. We know the timeline of Clark's life, so we can say, yeah, let's focus on this. And so it gives you some structure right out the gate. And you know, well, has he met Lois? Is he working at the planet? But you know, there's all of those things are up in the air for you to pull from and to use. When it's just coming out of your imagination, you know, and there are no rules, some people just dig that in a big way. For me, I need a little bit more structure. So that's, you know, it's harder. It's definitely harder for me to do that. If I could easily create my own shows and my own worlds, I feel like that's what I'd be doing. I'd be out there doing it, because let me tell you something, the money's better. If nothing else, the money is better. But, you know, I can't complain.
I got you, man. Daniel Knopf had mentioned this to me, and I'm going to paraphrase because you know, it's too long of a quote. But he was talking about writers. He said that we're the most egotistical and neurotic people at the same time, because we all believe we're brilliant, yet we're all scared to be found out as frauds.
Oh, yes.
At some point, does it feel like, you know, because you've done so much great stuff and so much fun stuff that I've reviewed in the past, and now I finally get to talk to you one-on-one. Does it ever feel to the point like, I'm getting paid to write fan fiction?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All the time. I think all the time. I mean, literally all the time. I can't believe it. I also feel like, you know, look, I think fan fiction is a great thing, and I think it's a great outlet for a lot of people. In many ways, what we do is sort of a sanctioned version of fanfic, right? But I think the difference is with fanfic, you really get to explore everything you want to explore. It's more of that creative brain that we were talking about, where you can really throw your imagination to, you know, out there and do what you want. There's still, you know, when you're dealing with somebody else's properties, there are rules, you know. If they tell you can't have Scrappy in the movie, you know, you find another way to write the movie without Scrappy. You know, so again, I think I like that stuff. I crave that kind of structure. If you tell me I can't do something, then I'm just going to find another way. And let me tell you, it's probably going to be a better way. I think I've always felt like there's always a better line. There's always a better joke. There's always a better way to do it. You know, the product that we put out to market is just where we ended up at that moment, when we just didn't have any more time to mess with it. You know, you could write and rewrite to death, but at some point, you know, it has to live on its own and get out there in the world. So yeah, you know, I am, but to answer your question, I am constantly amazed and dazzled by how fortunate I've been to get to do what I get to do, and I'm also blown away by the people who are my peers, my colleagues, who do this and have done it, who teach me every day, who you know, we're not just creators of these things, we're consumers of them. So I'm constant. I mean, I can't wait. Yesterday, my friend Jeremy Adams wrote a movie for Bruce Timm called Soul of the Dragon, a Batman animated movie that is just looks like the coolest thing I've ever seen. And I can't wait. I haven't seen it yet. I can't wait to see it. So
I'm waiting for my copy to arrive, because they know I'm going to review it. Because yeah, it's just, I mean, come on, Batman in the 70s, and Jim is. Oh, by the way, Jim is in the sneak peek for that, dressed basically like. God, I'm losing my fanboy cred. Who was the tour manager for the band for Josie and the Pussycats, and then Jabberjaw?
Oh yeah. Wait, is that so? By the way, I helped. I don't know the name you're thinking of. I went with Jim to the costume shop, and we picked out that suit together. We had so much fun that day.
Right.
He and I lived near each other, and the warehouse was nearby. He's like, "Hey, come along." I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." This is before the pandemic, you know. Yeah, he has a lot of fun. There's the sneak peek though that is on Soul of the Dragon is for the next movie, and I think there are stills out there right now for Jim's next outfit for that movie, which is it's a complete reversal, a completely different thing than what you saw for Soul of the Dragon.
And I just
He's
looked it up. It's Alexander.
Alexander.
Alexander Cobbett. It was what's it called? It was Alexander Cobbett III, voiced by Casey Kasem.
Well, of course, voiced by Casey Kasem.
I know we're running out of time because you have a late morning meeting with the guys with the big red and white N, who are dominating the streaming industry, which we love. We love the guys at Netflix because they've been taking care of us as well.
Yeah, I'm working on a new thing with them that I can't talk about, but we're starting in a few minutes. So.
Well, fantastic with that. Dream project that you haven't worked on yet, and then where can we find you on social media to connect?
First of all, dream project, easiest thing. I want to get my hands on Star Wars, some way, shape, or form. But I also want to get my hands into Star Trek. So, I don't know. Star Wars and Star Trek, those are dream projects. And I'd take either one or both, please. Follow me on Twitter. I am Tim Sheridan is my handle on there. You can find me on Instagram as well. I love Tim Sheridan. I swear it was set up by the fan club.
Or your husband,
Yeah, he is the fan club. There's no fan club.
Tim, it's great that I finally got to talk to you after reviewing so much of your work in the past, man. And, I'm glad social media brought us together for all this. When we can finally go to a Star Trek convention, I'll be thrilled if you join me. Your husband will go to Vegas and, we'll kick back over there.
I'm there. I remember my dad took me to my first ever Star Trek convention right before Star Trek V came out. I met Nichelle Nichols and got her autograph. I couldn't believe it. It was the greatest day. My dad ran into his boss, completely dressed as Captain Kirk, and it was like my dad couldn't believe it. It was the greatest. It was great. Star Trek. I love Star Trek. I can't wait. Let's do it. Let's absolutely do it. Let me just say this. Thank you for everything, for following the stuff that we do, that I've done, and keep watching, keep reading. It's so nice to talk to fans, and that we get fans reviewing the work of other fans. I really appreciate everything you do. Thanks for doing it.
And Critics' Choice members. Don't forget that too, man. I cross the line into both.
Very important.
Tim Sheridan, dude, you've been killing it. I mean, the only thing missing was having Scrappy pee on Bobby Flay in Scooby-Doo and the Gourmet Ghost. But Lego DC Superhero Girls, Justice League Action, Scooby-Doo and the Curse of the 13 Ghosts, the Death and Return of Superman, Sergeant Rock, Teen Titans Go, Transformers, War of Cybertron trilogy in the second act, Masters of the Universe Revelation. You are killing it, man. I can't wait to talk to you again. I know, dude. I'm running out of breath just reading your credits. The only person more is Frank Welker at this point.
Let me plug this. Everybody pick up Teen Titans Academy, #1, coming in March from DC. It's going to be fun.
Beautiful. So, either order it online or go to your local comic shop if they're open in your area. Hopefully, if they're open in your area, go pick it up in person. Support small business.
Order it from your local comic shop, too. You can do that nowadays.
Oh, that's right. So many of them are doing that. Support local and small business. We need those guys to stick around. Tim, congratulations on everything. Next time we talk, because I know we ran out of time, you're going to have to take us through the difference in writing a script for a comic versus writing a script for an episodic television series.
I will definitely do that when I figure out what it is. I'm still trying, man. I'm trying.